What is going on, everyone? Welcome on into Open Ice Hits. A lot going on around the hockey world, and we're just going to jump right into it today. There was a pretty controversial hit that went down when the Penguins played the other day, and Tanev had a hit that, look, I saw Twitter going crazy, and I honestly didn't even realize what happened. Of course, the clips were flying around, but it didn't register as I saw the clips. But he got a game misconduct, and he was kicked out. I don't know. I have this weird feeling on it that in 2021, I almost understand the penalty side of it, as if maybe a 2-minute boarding could have possibly been called, which kills me inside to say that. But just understanding where we are in today's game, I would understand it, even though I don't like it. But I do think going overboard and kicking the guy out of the game is a little frustrating. So when you saw the hit initially, did you think it was worthy of that?
It's such a tough question. Look, maybe part of my problem is I saw a shorter clip first. So the shorter clip says no, in my opinion. I mean, what are you supposed to do? He extends his hands a little bit at the end of it, but that's a result. That's a natural body movement. That's not he didn't force it in that way. And didn't look like he did anything terribly wrong. It wasn't late. It wasn't high. It was kind of just a good, clean hit. And then the only thing that I found that you could argue is he took several strides to get there. That's about all I got. But I don't know if it kicks
one.
a guy.
I
No,
hate that one.
No, but I don't know if it's kick a guy out of a game.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, give him 2 for charging. Fine. He took a few extra steps. Give him 2 for charging. That's fine. But 5 in a game, I don't know about that. I think the bigger story to me is quite possibly, and I mean, look, we can have this debate at another time, but quite possibly the biggest name that you've got in the sport, if you want to look at it that way. I know like I said, I know there's a debate over that, but when that player comes out after the game and tells you, can we just get some clarity on what's a good hit and what's not a good hit? I get that they're protecting people, but what's a good hit and what's not? Sounds like a cry for help from the players. Like, we don't know what's okay. So what can we do? How can we be physical? Like, it's a fair question at that point in time. At that point in time, if that's not a clean hit or that's worth a game misconduct or whatever, then don't hit anybody anymore. That's where it looks like it's heading.
No,
Like,
we can't do that.
No. I'm not saying not to, but like if that's what we're going to qualify as a 5 in a game, then don't let people hit anymore if that's what it is. Like, you're not providing anybody with any help, because that will make somebody else who plays that way. And Brandon Tanev's a good example of it. Brandon Tanev's a hard-nosed player. He plays a tough game. He's in that bottom 6 type role. That's how he plays. And if that's not going to be allowed in this game, if that's the way you're going to make a call, then it's going to make players like that shy away from the fact that they can even do something on the borderline of that. I understand that there's hits out there that are gray area and that you have to consider them, but I just don't get it. I don't get why that warrants kicking a guy out. And then not only that, but obviously the next day there was no information at all in terms of, like, he didn't get a call about, player safety or anything like that. So I thought that was the point of being able to review those, is not to just sit there and say, oh yeah, we're giving a 5 and then going to check to confirm it. It was, you were able to look at something and make a determination that it was as vicious as it really seemed. And I think that's one where the end result looked worse than the actual action itself. Okay, I understand it. The guy was down for a little bit. He fell awkwardly, went into the boards. He was in a bad position, and it didn't seem like it was that much that made it look like it was right. And I don't even know if I agree with the boarding call per se.
Okay, because that's what I was going to say. If I was to call anything, and I hate it. I hate that I even think this way, but it really is just how this game has transformed, and we've seen it go down. We've seen controversial stuff, and we know how it's ticky-tacky now. You can't get away with some hits. So if there was anything, okay, I can see with the charge, but I don't really like that. If anything, and I really do, like, I'm almost disgusted in myself. I might have to take a shower after saying this one, but I do really feel that if anything, I could see a boarding in 2021 being called. But that again, regardless of what you call that, a 2-minute minor, while that could be labeled a bad call, okay, you have bad calls in NHL games. You have bad calls that are minor penalties that you might want to have back. If that even is the case, I could see aborting. But when you start going 5-minute major, the reaction, and even Berkey, you mentioned what Sidney Crosby had to say. Berkey had something to say as well, and he said, you know what? If I was on Sportsnet, I'd be saying the same thing. That is an unbelievably bad call with it, and it's just so aggressive. And I wonder if there's a reason why he didn't get a call from player safety, because, hey, we don't see it as anything brutal. This is just a referee making a poor decision, and the NHL doesn't have a... But should they come out with a statement and say this shouldn't have been done? And then it's almost like throwing the referee under the bus if that's the case?
No, because the league won't do that. But
Right.
That's but in the same realm of things, then and I guess if anybody watched it and saw how Tanev reacted to it, I'll clean up his response for our show and just sit there and say, yeah, it's a joke. I mean, it's a joke if you think that that's acceptable to just move forward with that as a precedent for a major penalty, because there's been way worse than that goes unnoticed, that doesn't. I mean, we had a text conversation going back and forth the other day because we were both watching the Calgary Edmonton game from Monday night, and there was a fight in the game that was the result of another hit where same thing, a player took a hit, and that was much more worthy of drawing somebody's attention. I mean, that might have been worthy of a major because at least that was a hit to the head. And you go, okay, I see the problem here. I see why it qualifies as something serious. Even if you go back and try to dissect it perfectly and go, well, does he lead with an elbow? No, it looks like it's just a shoulder. Did he hit the head first, or does he hit him in the shoulder and then the head gets contact? Like, you can try to dissect it every which way. Ultimately, the guy in that game didn't even, I don't know, did he even get a penalty for that? I don't believe he did, right?
I don't think so.
Right.
No.
So eventually what happened? The players took care of it themselves. Somebody went out there and defended his teammate. And did it lead to something probably more serious on the other end again? Sure, but that's beside the point. If that didn't get called, but this is the precedent for calling a 5-minute major when it's something that the end result looked worse than the actual hit itself, then where are we going here with this? And that's what the league has to decide right now, probably, is you got to decide what's allowed physically, because I think you're seeing a lot of teams out there try to walk the fine line, and a lot of players out there who most of the time anymore just don't even bother to make contact, because they look at it and they go, if I make contact here, it's going to be a late hit, or it's going to be a hit to the head if I launch myself the wrong way. So they just peel off. They don't even bother, because why try to put yourself at that risk? You can't afford to take the penalty, probably.
Yeah.
So don't
Donald
even do it.
Brashier's probably just pissed off watching this type of hockey. But I keep going back to the boarding. And the only reason why I say that is, if it was an open ice hit, no pun intended here, I feel the awkwardness falling into the boards is somewhat what made the call happen, because if there's no boards there, and let's say it happens more at the center ice dot, or maybe at one of, I don't know, let's say the center ice dot's the perfect example. You get hit there, and then when you fall over, you have 15, 20 feet of ice to slide into the boards. I don't think that call is made. So I that's why I keep associating it with the boarding. I think it's the way that he fell into the board so brutally. I don't know if they would have even looked at how many steps was being made after the contact happened if he fell and there was so much ice to work with before any contact was made with the boards. Do you agree with that, or do you still think it would have been called? Because that's really the only reason why I think it's even called, is the way he was falling into the boards. I can't imagine in a million years someone calls that hit a 5-minute major if that was open ice. But hey, I could be wrong, and trust me, I've seen bad calls before.
Oh, no. I think I agree with that, because I do think it's the way it looked at the end of it, and half the time, do they even see this? Do they even see it until they look around and see a guy who looks like he's just been plastered against the wall, and then realize, well, probably should make a call there because it looks like somebody got seriously hurt. Not when the hit, that technically it is an open ice hit. He's not on the boards per se. Right. It's a clean hit. And then he falls into the boards awkwardly. And if you do want to give him a penalty for something, like, that's the thing. Like, at the end of the day, you can look at certain hits that happen and go, well, the puck's not there, so it's automatically interference. You got to give him 2 for interference. We can shake our head all day over that type of stuff, that any penalty is assessed in certain situations, but you go, all right, fine. If you can find whatever crosses the line, whether it's late hit, took some extra strides, too close to the boards, whatever. But if we're just going to start dishing out majors, like that, then you got a really big question in your hands. And now I think it's going to start coming to a head. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that'll look and go, well, look who's talking, look at who it is who's trying to sound the call for to define what's a clean hit and what's not. So players just know, it's Sidney Crosby, who most of the time, let's be honest, gets the benefit of the doubt with calls because he's right. The league does go out there and it's designed to protect the players in some capacity. He's right. That being said, if you're out there trying to protect and yet, you can't always protect them. It's a physical game. You can't protect them every second of the game. That if somebody hits somebody the right way, let's say this way. If you hit somebody at, how many feet in front of the goal line from the end boards, and the guy slides because or he loses his footing and it's just a good battle, but he loses his footing, goes into the wall, jams his leg. Now he's just broken his leg possibly. That's how many months of recovery and all that stuff. And it's accidental. You put yourself on the line every night from a physical standpoint. So you can't just look at the fact that the guy hit the boards after it was over and look at the end result and then go, well, that's 5 in game. Thank you for playing.
I agree with you. It's brutal. I just wonder because, we're asking what is hockey now? What is the physicality of it? Is it possible? Because we saw a couple years ago, and we're going to tie this to football a little bit. In the NFC Championship game, everyone knows about that Rams-Saints call that really blew the game, and the Rams ended up going to the Super Bowl. It was egregious. I mean, it was one of the worst calls ever in history of sports. And it was no call. It should have been the pass interference, but it was a no call. They held the whistle. It was so bad. Is this maybe just a scenario where it's not really the new norm? It's not really where hockey is going. It's just one of those really ugly, brutal calls that, hey, we're not going to bring it up. We're not going to throw anyone under the bus. It was a bad call, and it's not really setting the line for what is being called later on. It's just in its own vacuum. Bad, brutal, hey, let's move on from it. Instead of, this is where hockey's going. You know what I mean, though? Like, maybe the scenario was just awful, and it's not really where the sport is going with the physicality of it.
Well, I think, again, you have to let the players know what's acceptable, because the other thing about it that's different is, look, let's not hide behind the fact that the officials have a tough job to do because of the fact that they are trying to protect the players. And just about every year at this point, even if it's not overly noticeable, the game keeps getting faster. Everybody moves faster. Everybody skates faster. It's just the way it goes now.
That's why I'm not playing anymore.
Right. but this is the point, though. Like, if it keeps getting faster, then yes, it's harder to determine in the moment what is acceptable and what's not. And it's split-second decisions. But that's why you need to give the players some form of idea of what is allowed. Like, this to me is not, it's not even an officiating problem. It's a league problem that you need to sit down and define your rules here. It's like what we always used to say and still do to an extent about goalie interference. What is it? Define it. Just give us a clear-cut picture. Don't leave us with so much gray area. Well, you're leaving us with an awful lot of gray area on what's a clean hit and what's not, and there's nothing wrong with something that looks bad. Like, I don't have a problem with the fact that because it looked like he went into the boards awkwardly and had to come out of the game. Okay. That draws a response from Boston. Go ahead. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with getting fired up and using that as a way to try to spark your team. That's fine. We saw the same thing, Flyers-Rangers on Monday night. Claude Giroux takes a hit. There was no penalty on the play, but until after the fact when you had 3 guys going at it with each other because you come to the aid of somebody. That's fine if that's how you want to respond to something that you thought looked bad, even if it is clean. I don't have a problem with that because that stirs things up. That shows that there's emotion in the game still. If you take out plays like that and say that's not allowed anymore and define it, well, then there's a good and bad to it, because the good is you defined it. You made it clear. You made it an understanding of what needs to happen or what you can and can't do. But it also takes out a wave of emotion that turns games around and makes it, that's what part of what makes it so exciting and endearing to fans is that's how you can respond to something. That when you don't like what somebody does to one of your teammates, you're allowed to go and respond to that, even if it was totally clean, because you can use it in that moment and say, We need something here. So I'm taking that, and that's the reason why I'm going to pick this situation and do it. Most of the time, you definitely can't get away with any more just deciding to pick a fight for no reason and just deciding right then and there. I mean, you can to an extent. Like if it's between both sides and you get them both to drop at the same time, sure.
Yeah, there's
But
a
you
couple
can't.
guys like
But you can't.
Reese and guys like that,
Yeah,
but for the most part,
yeah.
it's not that way anymore.
No. If you stage it, I think the officials still understand that if it's staged the way that it typically is, which is two guys asking if they want to, then it's okay. But you can't just go after a guy at any random point anymore. They're going to throw you out of the game faster than they did in this situation. They won't even review that.
Yeah.
So that's where you're at.
Yeah, no, it's crazy that some of these plays, and it's just sports, sadly, now with all the physicality and understanding the concussion side of things, and just everything, all the knowledge we have about the physicality in sports. But at the same time, it's only so much. Like CTE and the NFL, it's super scary to think about, but at some point, this can't be flag football. So you need to recognize that there is going to be a physicality side of the game, and there's going to be some damage while that happens as well, and there's going to be a line, and you're going to have to find the right mix and all. And if this call starts to become that mix of, hey, this is the line, well, then we're in a scary situation for hockey. And if it becomes more of the outlier and it's, hey, it was just one mistake and this isn't the line, well, then I think we'll all be happy moving forward. We just don't know. As you said, there needs to be some sort of clarification and all. But there was Go ahead.
Well, because look, we've learned around the league throughout the years, right? We've learned with any situation, you learn to adapt. We've learned now, and you've seen it on broadcasts. If you go back and look at a replay of a hard hit, or even if you do happen to catch it in a moment, if a guy got hit in the head, we know now to react to that in a certain way than to just treat it as acceptable. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the guy got hit in the head. It was, oh wow, look, head was down.
RJ
Keep your head up. Stuff like that. Exactly. And that was even fewer ago. I'm thinking back to when Eric Lindros was getting a concussion every 2 years, because you come through like that hit would never go in the league today. And it's understood now. Like you've created that line and you've defined it enough that people know if you hit the head like that, you're not going to get a good result. You're not playing the next game more than likely, things like that. It's even down to things like the shootout or 3-on-3 overtime. When the rules change like that and you do something different, you eventually learn to adapt. Look at what teams do now in the 3-on-3. When it was just brand new, what year was that? That was brand new, 14, 15, something like that.
Around then.
Like around then, right? So like it's been around for about 5 or 6 years, right? Well, the first year it was around, it was a complete free-for-all, and that's what made it so much fun, right? It was just back and forth. There's no structure at all. And now people know the most important thing to do when it's 3-on-3 is the longer you hold the puck, the more in control you are. So the more likely you are to find a way out of the game, right? Whether you get it to a shootout and you get the chance to go to a skills competition, or whether you actually set up that play that wins the game or draw a penalty or do whatever to put yourself in the best spot to win the game. But teams learned how to do that over the years. It didn't happen immediately, but they learned because that was now a part of the game. It's the same thing. If you're going to define what a good clean hit is in the game today, people will learn and people will take that and use it to heart, but they don't use it to heart right now because you're not giving us clarity. It's the same. That's why I said it's the same thing with goalie interference. As soon as you see a goal scored and there's a guy somewhere near the goalie, you have to think, I mean, how many times do we say that or see that said on a broadcast when we're watching a game? When a goal is scored and a guy's nearby, you're going, well, gee, are they going to challenge for goalie interference?
I will say, I do feel there's a better sense of it now than maybe a year or two ago. There was that one year where you were laughing because one game in the same night, it would be goalie interference. In another city, in another town, it would be a similar situation. It wouldn't be, it would be. It was a little bit of nonsense a couple years ago, but I do feel now, and maybe that's kind of the point that you're getting to once there's clarification. I don't know if that's the road you're going down, but I do feel I have a better sense of goalie interference now than, say, a handful of years ago.
A little bit, but there's still not enough in my opinion because we still question it too often. Like we still look, I could be watching any game on any night, and if something like that happens, it's a question of whether or not a coach is going to challenge. And you can look at something and you go, well, do you take the chance on it? Or,
that's why I think it is, though. I think it's more of, okay, time, situation, and if I'm wrong, power play to the other team.
Right.
More than it is, I don't know about this specific play. It's more just the risk of, hey, if we are wrong here, I do not want to give a man advantage to the other team.
Well, see, but here's the other thing about the clarity from the league as well. What do you see more often in those situations than not now? You see goal called on the ice, your call, make a challenge or don't, and we'll go look at it, right? So it takes all of the pressure off of the officiating staff because unless it was blatantly obvious, they're calling it a goal. And then they want you to do the rest of the work as a coaching staff and as a team and say, no, you know what? Don't like the look of it. Go look at it, and then they might overturn,
Do you
or they
hate that
might say,
mentality though, or do you like that? Because I don't know. I feel everything's situational, so it depends on the play, the way it looks, the way the goalie is, if he's inside the crease, outside the crease, if he's slashing guys in the back of the legs. Like, all context matters here. But I almost like the fact that the referees would call it a goal and then, okay, let's see if it was bad enough to take it away, rather than taking away a goal and then being like, ooh, I don't know if that was strong enough to be called goalie interference or not. You know what I mean? I almost say, like, hey, let it play out, and then from there, assess the goal.
I like the fact that they've changed it up to where it used to be if you challenged that and lost, it was your timeout, and now it's a penalty because it makes everybody think harder. It makes it allow for better flow to the game because if it was just a timeout, then how often does that happen in a game? You know what I mean? Like, where if you're having something like that happen all the time, and I know we're going to get into this later on in the show. So if you're having it happen that often in a game where it's 4 or 5 times or 2 or 3 times that you've got to worry about whether or not it's goalie interference or not, when you're getting scored on that much, that's what I'm alluding. That's the thing I'm alluding to when we'll get into something later. But, when you're getting scored on that much, at some point in time, you just throw your hands up and go, well, you know what? Does it really matter whether or not it counted or not? Maybe it's just better if you let it go, right? Like, most of the time, it only comes up once. So it's why you used to sit there and you go, well, I'm not going to call a timeout because I got to hold that timeout in case I need the challenge. Now you don't have that worry, but you also don't want to take the penalty. So you still question it and you go, is it worth it in this spot, or do we just sit there and go? And there's, because there used to be one of the other things that used to happen a lot is a coach would look at the situation and go, you know what, whether or not it gets overturned or not, the worst thing that happens is I lose the timeout. So I'm treating this like a timeout. And if it takes them 3 minutes to review, I just got 4 times the amount of time I would have gotten in a timeout to say, calm down, reset, whether this call, like, you could even call it and then or call for the challenge and then sit there and go, call's not going the other way. But this is just a reset. This is what you look at the scoreboard. It's 2-0. It's 3-0, whatever it may be after a goal like that. Now you've got to get moving in the right direction. And that's what we used to see. And now you've got teams that back off and go, I'm not calling that. I'm not challenging that because I don't want to go down a man. I don't want to make it even worse than what it already is, because if you're wrong, you're killing a penalty. And it could be another goal on top of what you're already trying to come back from, whether that's a game-tying goal, go-ahead goal. Remember when the Flyers had one a couple of years ago when they challenged for offside right after they had been tied up? I think it was 2 goals in a matter of 5-6 minutes, something like that.
Was that AV or was that
no? That
was
was
AV.
That was prior. It was a game in Nashville, really early in a year.
That was Hackstall.
Right, but that was an offside call. They thought they had an angle. I don't remember if it was clear cut or not, to be honest, but it doesn't matter. They got the penalty for being wrong on the challenge, and then got scored on the following power play, and it turned into a game where they lost in regulation. You got to be certain.
Is that that's where, as much as we hated Dave Hackstall and the experience here wasn't so great, is that even a Hackstall problem, though? Is that someone who gives them information upstairs, like, hey, we got an angle here? As much as I would love to sit here and rip Dave Hackstall to pieces on my Thursday morning, is that a coach thing, or is that more of like, hey, it's sort of like, we keep using football, so that's the analogy we'll rock with today. When you're a head coach, you got video people upstairs telling you what to do in a headpiece or whatever. Who makes that call? Is that strictly 100% head coach, or do they have people that can give them some information in that time? Or do they just look at the iPad?
No, they do. They have people, but
yeah.
The problem with that is that, like, at the time, I think it was a newer thing too. That was, like, I think the first year that they were assessing penalties for a failed offside challenge. I think it might have been the first year of the offside challenge, quite honestly. You always had the ability to sit there and say, let's review for goalie interference, or to ask for it or whatever, because you got to remember something. That was a new experience then too. It's still a relatively new feature to sit there and say, I'm going to challenge that call. I mean, that was, remember when that terminology first came into the NHL side and people thought they were going to give coaches red challenge flags like in the NFL. Like,
Throw it on
how do
the
you,
ice.
like, how do you indicate you want to challenge? You know what I mean? Like, so that I think it's still an adjustment process, even several years later, several seasons later,
Well, yeah,
because
that's why they're coming out with that
it's
new. Because I was going to mention, I did write it down here. We were talking, and you mentioned the clarification of the goalie interference. I was going to say of the offsides, right? We still are making that adjustment and figuring out
yeah,
when
they just changed it.
the toe drag. So you can actually have your foot off the ground now and still be in the zone, right? What is the wording that they have on it now? Because if you're yeah.
It's like the end zone in football. It's a plane, so there's a line over the blue line, if you will, and if as long as you are foot in the air but on that side of the line, you're allowed to still have your foot off the blue, because it used to be if any part of you was not on the blue line, it's offside.
Right.
And now it's not. And talk about how like an adjustment like that, or not even an adjustment, but like my point being how close the line is to being offside versus onside in certain situations, how much of a timing issue it is for a player. Because there was a game, I think it was over the weekend, if I'm not mistaken. It was the New Jersey Islanders game. The Islanders ended up winning in a shootout, but it looked like New Jersey was going to win the game in overtime. And they went back and they reviewed, and it was offside by, like a millisecond.
Ugh.
Like foot off the ice and over the line, still in the air probably, by centimeters. It wasn't even.
Did you think
Like it
Sean
was.
Couturier was offsides the other night when Hazy scored on the power play against the Rangers in the third period?
Yes,
Yeah,
that one
that
was.
second angle made it look closer than the first angle, though.
But that was very clear, conclusive evidence. And that's
Yeah,
the difference. Like, but that's what I'm saying. It's that's not anybody's fault that it happens, because you're just trying to time it right to make sure you have an edge in getting into the zone properly to get possession or to win a battle or do whatever for any team. And if you time it just slightly wrong and they come back and they look and they go, let's do it this way. At the least the one that you're talking about with Couturier the other night, they kind of said on the broadcast, oh, that was close, And when you think it's close and then you can go back and look, like chances are the team on the ice that you're playing took notice of how close that was. So they're going to look like I don't recall. And I'd have to go back and see if it was in there, but I don't recall if in that New Jersey Islander game that there was a moment where on the broadcast I got to go back and check really quick, because that did look close on the entry before the goal was scored. Like, it seemed like that was a done deal, game over. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know it kept going on. I turned it off.
Ooh, were you pissed off with yourself?
No. Well,
Okay.
at the end, because it was more general browsing and things like that. And
The old general browse through the game.
to an extent. I mean,
Okay.
you know what? I had turned it on because, and actually, ironically enough, I was bouncing back and forth between other things, and I saw it was going to overtime. So I'm like, let me pop this on really quick. And I mean, I didn't even watch the goal in real time, because I was looking at something else on another screen, and I just heard the goal call. Like, I just heard that they scored, and I looked down and saw who scored, and I'm like, oh, okay, Subban scored, game over, okay, and just went ahead with it, because there, like I said, there was no mention on the broadcast as it happened that said, well, this looks close, this looks whatever, and it seemed like everything was fine. I just didn't stick with it. But that's what I'm saying. Like, you either have an indication that this is coming, and maybe there should always be an indication that that's coming at some point in overtime. They check that stuff all the time. Got to make sure that before you get off the ice and the goal is good and game's over, got to make sure it's really that way. And they did, and that's how the call went.
Unbelievable. It really is. It's sort of like when the Canadians lost right before Claude Julien was fired. They had that very controversial, I think it was against Ottawa, in one of those games where they grabbed the point, but they lost to Ottawa. They won in overtime, and it ended up not counting, or they should have won, or whatever the case may be. Then Claude Julien gets fired afterwards. It's crazy, but we'll transition into a little bit of what's going on in Buffalo right now. But I do want to ask you this question. Is it crazy that when you said the word situation, I thought of Jersey Shore as I'm grinding through season 3 right now in a matter of 2 days? As soon as you went situation, I almost lost track of where we were, and I was about to throw Snooki your way. I thought we could talk maybe a little Jersey Shore on the pod. Does that make me a sick individual that's where I'm at in my life? You don't
I'm
even know
not
what to
touching
say.
that.
You're not a
Nope,
Jersey
I'm
Shore
not
guy,
even.
huh? You never even
No,
gave Jersey Shore time of day?
no,
Well, then
because
you're a disgrace. Because that's
no.
one of the most
Listen,
iconic shows
no,
that was ever on television. You just missed out on it.
no, I didn't miss out on it. I look at stuff like that, like honestly
No,
any of
stuff
those
like that
shows.
is my life outside of
Oh,
sports.
jeez.
As much as
I've heard
I
this.
love
Yeah.
sports, I love just garbage reality TV because it's so funny. It's so good. Durso, we're
Okay.
gonna have to do Jersey
No,
Shore
no,
Open Ice Hits podcast.
no, because here, well, then like,
Go ahead, give me your assessment.
no, because yours. Okay, here's the thing, because you're on the same wavelength as me when it comes to, yeah. When I'm not watching sports, you're looking for something else. I'm totally in agreement with you on that. Your version of funny out of that is different from mine. So I'm more likely to put something else on that'll make me laugh than
Well,
that.
what
Like,
is because Krueger's got a lot of time to watch television. This is how we'll transition here. If you were Krueger, what would you be watching on TV now that you're taking away time from hockey? What is it?
oh, do I take the low hanging fruit joke right now? No, because you're gonna sit here and say pick a TV show, right?
Yeah,
I
what
was
are you
gonna
going to say?
the Philadelphia Flyers to feel a little less bad about myself.
Oh, okay, all right. You can do that as well after that 9-0 loss. We can go down that road if that's the one. Do you want to go there over Krueger?
No, we'll stick to Krueger first because that was really a bit. That was like, when news is inevitable.
Yeah.
You're waiting for it
They had
and
12
waiting
straight
for it and wait.
losses. 12.
I mean, not only that, but I mean, how many weeks ago was this now? I have to go back and look at their schedule, but I mean, it was becoming all right, here's the best comparison I have for you then. Do you know that there's like the thing that people do when someone's expecting a baby and they go, we have a pool for when the baby's going to be born?
Yeah.
You could have done that with Ralph Kruger's firing. Like, which day is it going to happen? Because you just knew it was going to happen. Take your pick of which game you thought was the breaking point, whether it was after the loss in Philadelphia where they led the game by 2 at 2 different points and still lost the game in a shootout. The 3-0 shutout loss to Pittsburgh, the 6-0 shutout loss to Washington.
That's the one right there. That's the one because the Flyers one, at least if you were trying to maybe be a little optimistic, hey, maybe the next night we'll be able to get it. We were up 2 goals. We played kind of tough for a little bit. We had the lead. Maybe there's something there. But once you lose to the Penguins and then the big time shutout to the Capitals happen, that right there is the spit in the face moment for me.
I know I just made the joke, like, watch the Flyers to feel a little bit better about yourself. But at the same time, I mean, that's the only team. I'm looking at the schedule right now. Since where was it then? They won a game on February 23rd. That's how long ago. They won a game 4-1 against New Jersey. And since then, I've got 4-3 loss to New Jersey, 3-0 loss to Philly, 3-0 loss to Philly twice. Same result, both days of a weekend. 3-2 right to Rangers, 5-2 to the Islanders, 5-2 again to the Islanders, 5-2 again to the Islanders. How about that? 3 games in a row against the same team, same result. 5-4 in a shootout to the Flyers again, 5-2 to Pittsburgh, 3-0 Pittsburgh, 6-0 Washington, 3-2 New Jersey, and he's out. The highest scoring game they've had individually over the last time is 4 goals. Once. I mean, how many 2s did I mention there, right?
Yeah.
Or zeros. I mean, they've been shut out 4 times, and then they don't get over 2 the rest of them.
It's just crazy. And the reason why I'm looking over here on my one screen, if you're looking at me like, Brodes, why aren't you looking at me? Well, I pulled up NHL.com earlier this morning, and I saw that Taylor Hall was the first storyline on their website, but I didn't click on it. But as we're talking about the Sabres, I was like, why not click on it now? It's just about in terms of, and I know we kind of touched on Taylor Hall and his decision to go to Buffalo anyway, and it's not like he's having such a great season this year. So what is Taylor Hall's future? And it's just pretty much saying that the GM in Buffalo is open to anything and everything, and his job is to do anything to make this franchise move in the right direction. But I know we touched on Eichel leaving all, but like, what do you do? What do you do if you're Buffalo to get yourself back on track? You thought you were there. You hit rock bottom before you get Jack Eichel. You sign Taylor Hall, you get Jeff Skinner. Like, you make these moves, you think you're moving in the right direction. And then now, I read your game story against the Flyers Rangers, and you used the phrase rock bottom, right?
Mhm.
rock bottom for the Flyers, which maybe it is in their own universe, but in Buffalo's universe, this is rock bottom now. How do you? This is real rock bottom. This is worse than rock bottom. What the hell do you do?
Start over.
Yeah, I
And
know,
and no,
I
and
know,
no,
I
and
know.
and the reason I'm saying that is because at this point in time, you think about everything that's on the table, and you start at the simple points, and then you move to the more advanced points, if you will. And what I mean by that is, okay, who are the guys that you can think of on the team that you go are obvious moves? And one of the first names that comes to my mind is someone like Rasmus Ristolainen, whose name has come up before at deadlines and all that stuff. And you go, now's going to be the time. Somebody and I'm not talking about because I know that that's a name that's out there on Flyer Twitter that is like, oh, grab him as a defenseman or whatever. My point is somebody will, right? Somebody will out there because even the best teams in the league are sitting there. Like, take a Boston, for example. And I'm not saying they're going to trade him to Boston, but like, take a Boston. Could they add him to their third pairing and get something out of him? Probably.
Yeah.
That's a fair way to look at it, right? He can give you something, and you can go to a contender, and he can try to play for a contender and see where that goes. But I think that's an easy one. And then you get into the harder ones down the line because there's not a ton of easy ones, to be honest with you, because like you could sit there and say Skinner's an easy one, but not really because it's just not. I don't know if anybody really wants to deal with that. So you might be stuck with and look,
There's not a soul who would take Jeff Skinner on that contract.
and you have to be realistic about your situation too and realize that just because there may be a lot of obvious moves out there to make, or you have to start building it from top down, ground up, however you want to look at it, you still got to put a team out on the ice and play out the rest of the year and do it again next year and do it again the
Well, what
following
was
year
the
and however
season
long.
ticket thing that came around just a week ago or so that nobody, not a soul, paid for their
Yeah, yeah,
season
yeah.
tickets? Come
No,
on,
it wasn't something like that. I don't think it was that not a soul did, but it was like they had
Yeah.
but something like they only had room for I believe the restriction in like New York in general is like 1,800 people or something like that, which is I guess about 10% of the building, roughly. And they didn't even sell that out among season ticket holders. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure that, like take the New York Rangers, for example. I'm sure that if you only have room for 1,800 people, you're finding a way to get 1,800 people in the building, and maybe only 300 of them are either single game ticket purchases or secondary market purchases, and the rest are actually season ticket holders who have waited for that
What
moment,
about the
right?
Red
Like,
Wings? You think the Red Wings would be able to do the same thing?
ooh, I don't know. I mean, well, no, because like to me, there's a group of people out there that probably are still going that direction because of the history of the franchise, that they've been part of that for so long. Maybe it's run through their family for generations, as long as, from the day that they started playing in Joe Louis Arena down to, the new arena, all
Just
that
got
stuff like that.
goosebumps. You talk about the Jello. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah. So, no, but let me go back to the Sabres and the obvious, like, or the obvious and then the more advanced, right? Like the more advanced becomes you sign Taylor Hall to kind of go for it, not completely go for it like you were going to be some major contender, but to take that step in that direction, right? To go and say that you were not just hanging around to be the bottom feeder. That it was like, maybe there's a close push. You might not make the playoffs, but you'll be in the conversation, right? That's what at least the thought was. Forget it, I think his time is limited at this point because you've got to make something out of that situation at this point, whether that's trading him at half of the cap value because the season's half over and the trade deadline will take care of that, whatever. I think that became Taylor Hall became an obvious move from more advanced. I mean, it's advanced because he's got a bigger contract, but it became an obvious move the second that you brought Jack Eichel into the conversation, because now if that's what you're going to do, then you got to go have Taylor Hall go with him, not necessarily to the same place, but he's going to have to go also, because there's no reason to keep Taylor Hall there if you're not going to have Jack Eichel around to come back from what he's working through. Obviously, like I'm not saying, Jack Eichel's a hard trade right now because he's hurt, and once he comes back, there are teams out there that would be dying to have a guy like that on their team. So it's going to work out. Like they'll get a partner if that's the way it goes, but it's
I'm
not
just
like
looking.
it's
I'm
going to
putting
change
myself.
anything.
Yeah, I'm putting myself in the fan shoes of Buffalo Sabres because here in Philadelphia, we're going through an Eagles debacle, and the Flyers are kind of frustrating at the moment. we understand how it is here in Philadelphia with our franchises and all, but I've never experienced having to be. Look, the Phillies are brutal, and they've been bad, and they've been through like rebuilds and all, but even their bad isn't Buffalo Sabres bad. They won a championship in '08. They went back to the World Series in '09. They had that run of '08 to 2012 that I was spoiled with that wasn't traditional with Phillies baseball. They're one of the most losing franchises for a reason, but even that is still not as low as the Sabres. So I don't even know how I would operate if there was a team that I loved so much like I do here in Philadelphia that was ran to this level where they finally get an Eichel and he's wearing the C, and before he even hits his prime, he's not even in his prime yet, dude. Before he even hits his prime, you need to trade him to reset everything once again. If I ever had to be emotionally tied to a franchise that is ran that way, I don't know how I would do it.
Yeah, there's not really much of a playbook for it, you know? And I mean, it's the conversation that you start to have when you realize that it's also, you know, you've gone through how many coaches or you've gone through how many GMs and you've made that change and you've made this change and you're changing something like they took forever, right, to make the GM change. And finally that happened last year, and they bring in, you know, and Kevin Adams comes in now and he's the new guy and he's trying to make deals that you think are going to turn in the right direction. And now you're looking at the coach. And it seemed like the coach was an obvious one. Like I said, I think it was coming for the better part of 2-3 weeks at this point. And it's not like it's going to change anything immediately. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason for losing 12 games in a row, no matter how you spin it. So what does it become? It starts to become a player issue. And it's not, you know, it's not that it's Jack Eichel's fault. It's not that you have to move on from him specifically. Because he's one guy on a team of 20 players every night. And he hasn't been in the lineup for half of this either. And that's why I'm saying it's not his fault by himself. But when you start to evaluate yourself and you go, where are we going? Where is this? You know, where do we see ourselves in 2-3 years? It's probably not changing much. You know,
Yeah.
does Jack Eichel's impact by being in the lineup make you all of a sudden start to win games? You weren't winning games to begin with. You're literally sitting at the bottom of the standings now. And it was one thing to look at them at the bottom of the standings and say, well, they haven't played as many games as everybody else because they had a COVID situation and all that stuff. They're caught up enough now. You know, they're halfway through the season. They're 28 and they're still at 16 points and they're still at 6 wins.
Jeez.
And even Detroit and Anaheim and Ottawa and all these teams that people didn't have expectations for this year are significantly better. You know, because it's not like it's a close margin. It's still 6 points.
You know what? It makes that 9-0 loss to the Rangers not too bad from a Flyers perspective, huh?
Well, it makes it not bad because it's one. You know, it's only one. It's not like they've gone. You know, it's not like they've gone out and lost 12 games in a row and then they give you that. You know, like that's
That was the
like
worst
that.
in the world.
No, but that's. I think that's exactly the point. Like, you know, like you look at that 6-0 loss that Buffalo had to Washington, and you go, does it even get worse than that? The 11th loss in a row, and it's 6-0, not even a game, might as well not have even shown up. You know, when it's your 11th in a row and you're going, well, this is like, how do you get any? You're right. How do you even get worse than that?
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I really am. It's a shame because I don't know how I would feel if I was a Sabres fan. I truly do feel bad for them, but there's nothing you can really do. They have the power. You can't do much other than not show up to games, and I don't think that would force them to become a better franchise because they've been sucking for so many years. But let's get into that Flyers-Rangers game. The way that I look at it is, 9-0 in professional sports in an NHL game. This isn't Junior B. This isn't U16 AAA. This is the NHL. To lose 9-0, that is so brutal. I don't even think brutal puts it into perspective. There's so many words I wish I could find in the middle of my brain right now to throw at you, but we're pissed off about it, and it's quite frankly, it's unacceptable. 9-0, and I think that's so bad. That was the first half of a back-to-back. It's almost like this Islanders game that they play on the second half of the back-to-back is season defining.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's 1,000%. There, 2-0 in the first period is not impossible. It's not good. Obviously, you can't continue to do that, and they've done this with regularity in the last several games where it's fall behind maybe by multiple goals or give up multiple goals before the end of the first period or the end of a second period, and you're looking at a hole that you have to climb out of. And you can't play like that. I mean, I just had that conversation not long ago, and it was about, might have even been on our last episode when we talked about them a little bit. And I said something about that year that they went behind 2-0 32 times out of 82 games. And you go, if you play like that, the season result is you getting what you deserve because you can't chase the game that often. So for everything that it was, 2-0 is not impossible, especially when you looked at the way that things were going for both sides. The Flyers were out shooting the Rangers in the first period. It
So
certainly
that
looked.
means they were trending in the right direction.
No, it doesn't. But just hear me out. Like, where I'm going with that is that no, there's a difference between out shooting a team in the first period and also seeing that the opportunities were there at that moment. Like in the first period, just because you were losing, it didn't mean that they weren't generating opportunities and that the Rangers weren't trying to hand them right back. That's the thing to me that really stood out. It's like the Rangers weren't playing the sharpest game either in the first period. They took advantage of the opportunities. They went up 2-0. But think about the game on Monday, It went from 2-0 Flyers first period, pretty strong, looked good, right? And then second period, not so good. Had to find a way to fight back after giving up 3 in a row. You can turn the tide after a period. It's not impossible. And you just beat this team 2 days ago. So just go out there and turn the tide, right? And I'm, we're doing this a little early, so takeaways aren't out yet, but it's written, it's done. And I basically wrote in there that from the second that the third goal was scored, and it was about a minute and a half, a little more than that into the second period, that at that point in time that team decided the game is over and decided right then and there, it didn't matter what was going to happen. They weren't going to try anymore because that's what it looked like.
Yeah,
there was no back.
Third
No.
man high. You were going to say no back check, right?
Yep.
The amount of time and space that the third man had when they entered the zone, it was sickening. It was so bad. They would have 30 seconds of, oh, here's the third guy high. Oh, let's pass it back door, one touch, all that. And then how about the speed coming into the zone? Where's the gap? Where Zibanejad comes flying through the right side. There's no gap. He's got all the speed in the world. Panarin makes a nice dish, and he's in easily to go score. Sanheim and Myers, -5, both of them, before halfway through the game. It's hard to be -5 in one hockey game. You were -5 before the halfway point of the game. They finished -6 each. I like Sanheim and Myers, but holy hell, that is brutal. And I don't even like Ghost, but with the fact that he was the one that was scratched, it's a little head scratching to me, no?
Yeah, it is.
Considering his goal scoring as of late?
That entire game was an organizational disaster because it showed that from management standpoint, you haven't addressed any of your issues. From a coaching standpoint, you're not playing your most optimal lineup, which kind of get what you deserve. I mean, pretty much the very first goal of the game told you everything because the first goal of the game was Andy Andrioff getting beat on the wall and Connor Bunnaman getting beat to the net. Well, they're the two guys that you put in to try to spark something, right? To try to turn things in that right direction, to try to give some guys a pause, right?
I'm
a reset.
okay with Bunnaman being in there. I don't understand the Andrioff one. Oscar Lindblom getting scratching. And I've been the one screaming that Lindblom hasn't been good enough. And also, that seems very hypocritical to say that I'm okay. Like, I don't think he's playing well, but I don't like the alternative. But I can understand Bunnaman more than Andrioff, in my opinion, at least.
Right, but that's the point. You went out and you won a game on Monday and then decided you got to make 4 lineup changes. I mean, let's do it this way. Prosser should have been out of the lineup. I agree with that one. And if you're completely healthy up front, you got to find a way to keep it. And I came out after whatever game it was, Saturday, I guess it was against Washington. And I even said then, Aube Kubel should have been benched for a game, and I would have done it the first one around. But now you went out and you won a game and you set a precedent. Now's not the time to be changing your mind about how inconsistent he's been, and going, well, now I'm going to change it up. You just won a game 2 nights ago with him in your lineup. And even if he didn't play that much, maybe that's what you're doing wrong, is you're still trying to rotate 4 lines and you're realizing really quickly it's not working that way. You got to limit the 4th line to 6 minutes a night, and the rest are going to play a lot. And I know it's hard to say that in a schedule that's jam-packed and there's a game every day or every other day, and there's not a lot of time for rest, and you could be driving guys into the ground. I get that, but Doesn't matter if you're thinking that you're driving guys into the ground or whatever it is. Every team's going through it. Every single team's playing at that kind of rate right now. And you don't see teams out, are the Pittsburgh Penguins sitting there saying we should rotate 4 lines and keep Sidney Crosby off the ice when it counts because we got to keep a balance. We got to keep him fresh for the next game. No, they're thinking about the 2 points that night and if they've got a shot at it. And there was nothing yesterday that said that you were going to have a shot, at some point in time. That was pretty evident. But yeah, to actually answer the original question, this game against the Islanders individually might be their season. If not, my argument was the 3 games you've got right now are it. Yeah. And just from watching it, my confidence level is as low as it gets in that team. I don't think they have a shot in that stretch of games because the Islanders without Anders Lee and the Islanders without anybody in their lineup, you can take your pick because there was good examples on Twitter the other day about it too, where it's like they lost Pelech and Cizikas for a stretch of games and went on a losing streak, and that's a 4th liner and one of your middle, if it's not your top defenseman, right? Or one, it can be, but like you can figure out the mix, right? And it's like, they're not standout names. They're not the names that you think when he's out of the lineup. Oh, it all goes downhill. Not for a team like that, right? I don't care who they're missing. I don't care if Anders Lee isn't playing or not. That team is sitting there right now licking their chops, waiting.
They don't even need Barry Trotz. Considering you can lose with anyone on the bench, apparently. Doesn't matter if it's Gordon Murphy, Barry Trotz, Chuck Fletcher. He could be on the bench. Who knows? On another team, you'd still lose. And I bring up Chuck Fletcher because I wonder if, obviously, your GM would never be on the bench of somebody else. But I just wonder if that loss now changes perspective on, hey, do we go make that one move? Do we go make that one defenseman pull? And I thought they alluded to it good on that because, remember, this was a nationally televised game on NBC Sports. They did a good job of kind of breaking down, hey, it's not just a package you give up for Ekholm because you'd keep Ekholm and you would protect him, and now you might lose a Phil Myers. Tough night to defend anything Phil Myers does, but you add that to the compensation of getting Ekholm because you now have to protect another player. So, I don't know. But I'll leave you with this. The thing that pissed me off the most throughout everything last night, which is crazy, is Nolan Patrick not burying on Georgiev. That bothered me more than anything I saw because I hate Nolan Patrick. I hate him. I can't stand him anymore. I'm out. How do you not lift the puck there? And that was a transition right the other way, and they end up scoring moments later. And I'm not saying that would have been the difference, but, dude, how do you not bury that biscuit?
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't even have an answer for you.
Good, because he stinks.
But like, but you're right. And here's the thing. This is something the two things I came away with from this one, having covered, in covering the team and trying to provide, because believe me, I hear it every day. When are they going to make a trade? When are they going to do this? They got to do this with this thing. They got to, believe me, I even saw after Monday's game, I guess it was, even after Monday's game, because they gave up 4 goals, I was still getting the stuff with, still stand by. Carter Hart should go to the minors for right now, or just get a reset or whatever. And it's like, you really want to put a guy who hasn't played in a year in the lineup and try to say, be a goaltender behind that steaming pile of garbage, right? Collectively, not just defensemen, everybody. But there's 2 things that I came away with from this that prove my points exactly when I talk about trades. Everybody who wants the goal scorer, I get you now. You know why? Because you don't look at this team and say 3-1 gets it done, right? You look at this team and go, it's always a 5-4, 6-5, got to score 5 to win a game. So that's why you want the goal scorer, because you really want the guy who at the end of the night this is going to transition perfectly to the last little point that we had to talk about. And before we close it out, but you want the goal scorer who that when the time comes to it, he's out there to do something for you and get you that goal that either ties it, wins it, whatever, right? That's the first part. The second part that I came away with is for everybody who I know wants the trade to be made so they can get back to a level that they think is going to change it around. This actually forces you to shy away from it more, because at this rate in time, at this point, do not trade somebody who's part of your future. And I hate talking like that again after doing that for all those years, but don't make a trade just to make a trade and set yourself back. Like, I don't want to see Matthias Ekholm on the Flyers if it doesn't result. Like, you shouldn't want that if you just know what the inevitable is.
It's the inevitable,
and right now the inevitable is not he's going to show up and they're going to make a playoff run. The inevitable is they're not going to make the playoffs, and you're going to be looking at a long offseason.
Yeah. No,
So
you're
if
right.
that's what, or if they do make the playoffs right now, what is the inevitable? That they crawl in as the 4 seed and they play, take your pick, because which of those 3 are they beating?
The Bruins.
Yeah, sure.
All right, that's a good spot. Look, you teased the goal scorer thing. We'll leave that for the next combo, for the next discussion in the next episode. But yeah, no, I said, this is something I said in my post-game reaction is, the fan right now in the moment is do anything to make this team better, but the good GM in this moment would analyze everything and say, you know what? You might not be the best idea to get rid of some of these players that you might need to rely on down the road or next year or the year after just to try and make a 4-seed push this season. So we'll see what happens. Well, it was a disaster.
Then I'll leave you with, and I'm going to have to go read it really quick because it's not set up on the thing, but I'll leave you with what I wrote in takeaways.
Okay.
Because if you're giving your post-game comments, I'll leave you with what I said. Right. And because I said something about how the next game goes beyond must win. It's your season. It's not an exaggeration. It's reality. You can either come out, show fight, show some determination, show you're better than the embarrassment to the Rangers, or prolong the mediocrity that the season's become. And it will be the way that the entire organization from the top down responds, whether it's to further trust in this group, make a trade to try to improve them, make a trade to shake things up, or do something out of left field, do something out of left field that is on the coaching level or the management level, or simply blow it all up. However it plays out, it's going to be fascinating to watch, but that's the point. What I think the storyline right now with that team is the response to not just that game in particular, that 9-0 defeat. It's the next game and maybe the rest of the weekend to an extent, because nothing's going to happen overnight, obviously, but it's what do you choose to do from there? It's what's your response to this beyond just on the ice? Because if you go out and you lose the next one and the one after that, and it turns into 3 games in a row, and maybe it's just as bad or it can't possibly get worse than 9-0. But
whoa.
Yeah, I know that's setting the bar, isn't it?
Whoa, could be 10. I was rooting for it.
Well, let's this way. Did you catch what I tweeted during the game?
I did. I saw that. It's pretty funny.
About the power play goal.
Yeah.
That was the only one they didn't have, and then after it happened, like on that power play, I turned around and I said, "I'm not sorry."
Oh, geez.
But nonetheless, like that's what's going to determine it. Like you have to figure, like this is going to be a determination of whether or not what you've been doing for the last 2 years and it makes last season look like such an outlier because, and not even last season, because this is the road trip to the West Coast prolonged at this point. This is the bad habits that were then that you broke out of and somehow got on this roll that lasted for 2 months into the playoff bubble, and you came back from the long pause and you won games then too. It just, for everybody, and believe me, I'm part of it. I was fooled by it because I looked at it and I went, well, it's mostly the same players.
Or it's
Why
standard,
wouldn't they be?
though, because isn't it playoff, not playoff, playoff, not playoff, playoff, not playoff? So were we fooled, or is this just what the Flyers have become? One great season, one bad season. One great season, one bad season. A great might even be a strong word. One good season, one bad season. One good season, one bad season. That kind of rotation. It seems we're stuck in that right now, and it sucks, Durso. I'm pissed. I'm pissed.
Yeah, I don't know, and it's gone on for the better part of the last, it's pretty much gone on since the 2012 season, when they had probably the greatest year they've had lately, because they not only went into the playoffs with a lot of confidence, but then won a series, looked like they were poised, because they won the first game of the second round too, and looked like they were poised to make that a longer run than they lost the next 4, and it was over. But then you had a shortened season the next year, out of the playoffs. You made the playoffs but there was a coaching change. But at some point in time, not to drag this on much longer, you've had 5 head coaches. You've had 3 GMs during this time. You know what you haven't had? A different core and a different group of players for the most part. You've changed a couple of pieces, but what are we really talking? You've changed the goaltender. You've changed the bottom 6. You've changed the third defensive pairing constantly, or whatever. I know you said something in your post game last night that was along the lines of, you're right. Matt Niskanen's not Nick Lidstrom, and he's one guy, so he doesn't make that big of a difference, but it sure looks that way. And that's a scary thought, because if that's really what was remember when we used to get crazy about the glue guy comments in the locker room, and it was like Andrew McDonald's a glue guy, gotta keeps the team get like
It's a lot of money to be a glue guy.
it is. But see, at the same time, does that make a lot of sense with Matt Niskanen? That Matt Niskanen was the glue that held it all together, just in more ways than one. The leader, one of the leaders in the room,
Yeah,
one of the
definitely.
guys,
Big difference
one of the
from
veterans.
Andrew McDonald.
No, I know, but like that's what I'm saying. Like that makes it less of a far-fetched statement in terms
Right.
of, maybe that guy really did keep it all together for everybody. And now his presence not being there, like, and I'm not saying it changes what we're seeing, but you know what I mean. It's just
Yeah.
It,
No,
it somehow
definitely.
kept it all together.
Yeah.
And I don't get why it's to this point, but like, I don't know how I even I had kind of checked out on that game as I was writing stuff. I was just trying to get to the end of it. I don't even think
you weren't studying and analyzing all of the
not in the
goals
third
that were happening.
Oh, no. I did see. That's why I know you read the recap already. Wait until you see the takeaways. Because screenshots from every goal to show you the gaps and the wide open nature of every scorer, or or where a guy was when he turned over. I mean, take your pick. Was it a turnover? Did a guy go to his knees early and try that stupid sliding move that we see half the time on odd man rushes, which drives me nuts?
Yeah, it went right through Phil Myers. I thought that Phil Myers play, it almost bounced off of him perfectly right to Zibanejad. But whatever. Regardless, you can see these takeaways at 97.3 ESPN.com. How about that? So look, with that being said, we'll end it here on such a sad note. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you on Monday's next show with Johnny Gaudreau checking in after the Battle of Alberta. So thank you guys all so much for listening, and we'll see you then.